Alright guys, welcome to the video today. So in this video I wanted to talk about sniping, kind of different loadouts or different parts of my subclass that I run, and kind of why I run them. And people have asked me this in stream, and specifically actually the stream that is featured in this video. People are asking, why do you use minimal strength? Why do you not want any strength? Why do you run max agility but like pretty much zero recovery and armor on something like a warlock? Different selections for primary perks, primary weapons, what I look for in a sniper, that whole sort of thing. And I wanted to condense it into one well thought out video. And without further ado, let's get right in the video. So the first thing, which I think is probably pretty obvious right now, is that I am running Voidwalker on a warlock. And for the longest time I had played on Sunsinger, so in tournaments and stuff, whenever I would be last word sniping, that's kind of what I would run. And for the vast majority, pretty much every single team that had a last word sniper, you were kind of expected to assign them the role of the barbecue or running Sunsinger. So I never really experimented with any other class when sniping except for Gunslinger at the very beginning of Taken King. But more recently, ever since the Sunsinger nerf, I've actually really learned to appreciate, and I really like Voidwalker for sniping. For example, if you get someone weak with a last word and they're hiding in the corner, a lot of the times you can't push them, right? Because you don't have a way for them to move, and you try to push with your primary, and if you happen to miss one shot, or maybe at that point they've started to regen health, and one last word shot isn't going to kill them anymore, then you end up getting shotgun. It is just, I don't know, I struggled for a very long time before I used Voidwalker when sniping, and I feel like it's just the perfect playstyle for me. Whenever I melee, like, I feel like on Sunsinger, I was very encouraged to always want to, if you see someone out in the open, you always feel like you're forced to throw a grenade or you're forced to run at them and try to melee them with a flame shield. But for this, it just feels extremely natural to me, and Axion bolts are the best way to get people to move out of cover. The hardest thing to play against, I feel like, when I'm running last word sniper, is people who sit behind cover and peek shot or head glitch with something like an IS Luna. But if you know someone is going to be sitting at B boxes on Twilight Gap and head glitching with an IS Luna, you can be floating towards them, and you don't even have to get an accurate grenade toss on them. Axions will seek through walls, so if you get it within the general tag radius that Axion bolts have, which is extremely generous, and it goes through walls, that's like a perfect way to get them to move. And players that I've talked to have vocalized their, not disgust, but how annoying Axion bolts can be to play against when they're running a last word sniper. As far as the perks that I'm running on the Voidwalker subclass tree, I have Axion bolts, Focus Burst as my movement ability, Vortex as my Nova Bomb ability. I feel like, Lance is cool, Lance is fun to play around with, but I feel like, having, especially if you're sniping, you're going to be a little bit more defensive, and you don't really, like Lance, it seems like something where you're floating around and you're charging in and you want to spear someone to make like a triple down, like you get 2 shotgun kills, you float around, you spear the other guy with a Lance. But you're not really doing that too much on a Voidwalker, and I feel like Vortex kind of works the best, at least for me. I'm running Surge as my melee ability on the, what is it called, Energy Drain, I believe the charged up melee is called for Voidwalker. I'm also running Annihilate, which makes my Nova Bombs explode bigger, so there's a bigger explosion from them. Generally pretty easy to hit people with them. I really like Nova Bombs because I feel like, especially when you're sniping, map control is a really big thing, and if you can kind of get a get out of jail free card, essentially, if you're behind in a one-on-one and then you kind of just poop a Nova Bomb out and you kind of contain map control, then that's a big thing for me. And I feel like when I'm playing with a shotgun, I have a tendency, like playing aggressive with a Nova Bomb, I seem more likely to throw it into a wall or a ceiling. I don't know, there's a little bit of a weird movement ability where like when you activate it and you're moving, you like keep gliding, but it is gliding up in the air when you're sniping, and throwing down a defensive Nova Bomb seems to work pretty well for me. And then the last thing that I'm running, the big one, is Vortex Mastery, and this essentially makes your Axion bolts have higher range, so they track for longer. They're very annoying. I feel like they might be a little bit faster too, but duration of the Vortex effect of the Nova Bomb and the Vortex Grenade will also increase. That doesn't really matter because I'm not running the Vortex Grenade, I'm running Axions, but it also does obviously give that boost to Axions. Like when I'm playing against players who run Vortex Mastery in comparison to Embrace the Void, I definitely notice the difference. It's just very, very annoying to be chased by an Axion for like a minute in a row, and it feels like you always have to be moving, your team's always getting split. And in general, when I kind of switch between the two, I always notice that I do better with Vortex Mastery pretty much every single time. For my armor stat builds, I try to run essentially as little strength as possible. If you ever do see me running with strength, it's because I think the armor piece looks cool and it happens to have strength on it, so that might confuse you a little bit. I just think it looks cool, and I like playing with stuff that looks cool. But anyways, moving on. The reason I don't like any strength on Voidwalker is because if you look at the melee compared to the standard non-charged Warlock melee, so essentially energy drain versus the non-charged Warlock melee, you're going to notice a big difference in tag radius and essentially like recovery rate. So recovery rate is how quickly you can melee again after you meleeed for the first time. And what I noticed when I used to run maximum strength and I always had my melee up is when I would get an angle on like a shotgun or whatever, and I would have the perfect, you know, double beatdown lined up, is that every single time I would get that Warlock melee off or that Voidwalker melee off, they would turn right around and shotgun me right before I could get the second one off, and it felt extremely sluggish. So then I started experimenting, and as soon as I started running 0 strength, all of my double melee kills were coming back. I run increased melee attack speed on my gauntlets, which I suggest you do as well. The whole playstyle with Warlock, with double meleeing people and having the super strong defensive grenades, is a big part of why I chose it for my opinion on the best subclass for sniping or whatever. But as far as running strength, I don't recommend it. You're going to have a harder time hitting people. The tag radius seems very, very odd. You'll see that like when you have an uncharged melee, sometimes you'll turn like 90 degrees to the left or right, or maybe even above you, and get a melee off. But for some reason with like the charged Voidwalker melee, that never happens. And there's a lot of instances where people will slide right underneath you, and if they slide underneath you and you try meleeing them, I'm not joking, it misses them. Like it does the lock-on animation but doesn't hit them. It seems like around like 70 to 80% of the time. A lot of people ask me in my second win video, they're asking, why do you not recommend second win but somehow you still run Surge for Voidwalker? A Surge is a very rare occurrence for me. Obviously, I run minimum strength, so I'm not going to have my charge melee up too often. But when I do, I really like the whole, like if someone floats past you and you get that melee off, you spin out your last word as quick as possible. And if someone is doing some sort of drive-by where they're like flying past you and somehow you get a melee, it feels like the Voidwalker melee pushes them almost sometimes and they go flying away. Being able to spin out your last word with increased speed, essentially it's the same thing as second win, except for it triggers or procs when you melee. Just having that I think feels really good, but it doesn't really add any inconsistency to my gameplay, because I feel like when it only happens once to twice a match, not after every single death you have, it doesn't really mess up anything too much, and it just feels really good, feels really crispy, and that's kind of why I like running it. So for the primary that I recommend, I'm sure it comes as no surprise, but it's the last word. And the main reason that I've chosen this, I think it's kind of obvious, but for me, like I feel like the most successful snipers that I see nowadays, is you kind of play like you don't main your sniper. There was a period where you could get away with having your sniper out 90% of the time, but being that there's really bad flinch right now and you can't really get too many bullets, like special ammo is pretty rare. Generally speaking, you kind of have to play around your primary a lot more, and the best way to do that is with a last word. So you can stop shotgunners, you can stop people trying to rush you, and at the same time you have a really strong secondary being your sniper, so that if you run around and you're getting picks all the time or kills with a last word and you look into someone's spawn, assuming you're kind of generally familiar with where people spawn depending on where you killed them, it just becomes a very strong play style, and I wouldn't really recommend running a sniper with anything else. So for sniper perks, I don't really recommend anything other than quick draw. Like I mentioned earlier, most of the time you should be having your last word out, and the times that you do have your sniper out, it's for quickly peeking at stuff. And if you have quick draw, it tends to be a lot easier to do that than if you didn't have quick draw. And there have been repeated like handling nerfs to snipers, and snapshot got nerfed as well, and right now I feel like quick draw is like the best readily available option. And once you get used to quick draw, it's very hard to go back. And I know not everyone has a quick draw sniper, and I don't actually have one besides this Her Benevolence, so if you don't have one, if you do the level 28 PoE, you have a chance at dropping the Her Benevolence, and you can reroll it afterwards for any perks you want. So I run Short Gaze with Quick Draw and Hidden Hand, and I believe Performance Bonus is my last one. But pretty much anything with Quick Draw is going to be good enough, and it really suits the whole like mobile gameplay where you're going to have your last word out around like 80% of the time, and the only time you're pulling your sniper out is in quick situations where you're trying to peek a lane where you think someone's going to be, or you already know someone is going to be. So you don't really need to have your sniper out all the time, but when you do, it's best that you can switch to it as quick as possible. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. That's going to do it for the video today. One more additional note is that YouTube has been doing this thing lately where like if you're on mobile especially, just videos that of people you're subscribed to don't actually end up showing up in your sub box. And recently there's been a little bit more of an issue with it, and I put out a Twitter poll, and I think like 40-45% of the people that I asked are subscribed to me, right? And it didn't show up in their subscription feed, and it didn't show up in their sub box. So the way to make it so that no matter what, for whatever channel you want to enable this for their videos to show up in your sub box, is you go to the channel you want to enable it for, you click on that little bell. Essentially it's going to enable notifications for your mobile phone, and that way when you're on mobile it should be popping up every single time. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any suggestions for videos in the future, then let me know in the comment section down below, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. Peace.